Born in Sulaymaniyah in Iraqi Kurdistan, Karwan Jamal Tahir is the son of Jamal Tahir, one of the founders of the PUK, the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, one of Kurdistan's largest political parties. Karwan's father was martyred in 1985 when Karwan was just 12 years old. In the fullness of time, Karwan moved to the United Kingdom in 1999 to complete a bachelor's degree in computer science and management at Manchester's University of Science and Technology. Following this, he served as advisor to the Kurdistan Regional Government's Council of Ministers and senior advisor to the Minister of Natural Resources. He was then appointed Deputy Minister at the Department of Foreign Relations, during which time he promoted the Kurdistan region's relations with the international community. He is now the Kurdistan Regional Government's High Representative in the United Kingdom, working to strengthen relations between the KRG and the UK. Today we will be covering three topics: the history of the Kurds, the current situation in Kurdistan, and the future for the Kurds in the region. Welcome back to the English Hour on ANN Satellite Television. Our guest today is Mr. Karwan Jamal Tahir. I should say His Excellency Karwan Jamal Tahir, because in every respect he is an ambassador to the United Kingdom for the Kurdistan Regional Government. Karwan, really an honor to have you with us. Thank you for being our guest on ANN Television.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Well, bless you. We're going to talk about three things. It's the anniversary of the uprising, and we're going to talk about the history of the Kurdish region, just in honor of that fact. And where are we? How many years now since the uprising?
25 years.
25 years, since 1991.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about the current situation, which of course concerns us hugely. We have
Absolutely.
Daesh, ISIS on the scene, and we're going to talk about the future, which will, God willing, be very good indeed. Karwan, thank you.
Thank you so much.
The Kurds are now one of the largest ethnic groups in the world that do not have a state of their own. The region known as Kurdistan covers parts of contemporary Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. In Iraq, Iraqi Kurdistan constitutes the country's only autonomous region. It is governed by the Kurdistan Regional Government, or KRG, the capital being Arbil. 1991 saw a series of rebellions in Kurdistan fueled by the belief that the then Iraqi president Saddam Hussein, who was responsible for systemic social repression, including the terrible slaughter in Halabja in March 1998, had become vulnerable to regime change. Tens of thousands of people died and nearly 2 million people were displaced, both at this time and during the preceding Al-Anfal campaign, brutally conducted by Saddam in an attempt to control the Kurds. Kurdish opposition nonetheless managed to establish the Kurdistan Autonomous Republic against all odds in what is now commonly referred to as Iraqi Kurdistan. Okay, Karwan. Yes, the history.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And Kurdish history is marked with oppression, prosecution, denial of identity, and also marginalization throughout the history. In none of the states, history were in favor of Kurdish people, the voice of Kurdish people. If we talk about the Sykes-Picot Agreement and the collapse of Ottoman Empire, which as a result some new state were emerged, although the Kurdish national movement and Arab national movement, they lived in the same area at the same time, However, we as a Kurd, our voice was not heard, and we have been neglected in all this international equation in the history. So the history was very cruel to us. However, we're still a survivor. Now, unlike the olden history, we are part of the equation, and we play our role in international equation and international effort, and especially at this particular time when we confronting the most dangerous terrorist organization in the areas,
yes,
Daesh and
yes,
ISIS.
yes. An awful organization. But it's 25 years since 1991. Just remind our listeners, because it should be engraved on our hearts, but the before the 91 uprising, and you're talking about the suffering of the Kurdish people. I mean, you had this terrible Anfal campaign by Saddam Hussein. When was that? And Halabja, of course.
Halabja was prior to Anfal. It was 1998 in March when Kurdistan region, the town of Halabja, were bombarded by chemical weapon by Saddam Hussein's regime, and 5,000 people were killed in a blink of eye, and still the survivors suffer from the outcome of this of that chemical weapon. Still there is some people getting a treatment as a result of that. And then the Anfal operation started, and estimated 182,000 people, Kurdish people, elderly people, young people, children were displaced from Kurdistan region and were massacred in the south of Iraq in the mass graveyard. So after the uprising, we managed to find some of those graves, massacres, and bring back the remains to Kurdistan region. So it was actually the ethnic cleansing were conducted against the Kurdish population at the time.
Yes.
Therefore, the world matters at the time were mounted. I mean, as I said, from the end of Cold War to the collapse of Soviet Union, which again resulted in emerging some new countries in Central Asia and Europe, and in fact that gave a granted a legitimate voice to the ethnic groups in that area, and gave the aspiration to Kurdistan region, and that coincided with the political situation, political scene in Iraq itself, when Saddam Hussein, with his insane action or act, invaded Kuwait.
Yes.
So the political leader at the time, most of them were in between the border between Iraq and Iran. They analyzed the if statement. What should Kurd do if Saddam invade Kuwait? So what we have to do? Then they, the Kurdish leader decided to, with a strategic plan, to have a uprising in Kurdistan region in collaboration with the people of Kurdistan.
So this was a strategy adopted, planned in advance of Saddam's invasion of Kuwait.
Absolutely.
By, I mean, effectively by Barzani.
Well, by all political leaders, President Talabani and President Barzani, and they have created a Kurdish front, because we had some political parties, so they created a Kurdish front, and altogether they liberated Kurdistan region, as I said, with the bravery of the people of Kurdistan region. Without them, we couldn't have the uprising succeeded.
Now the no-fly zone was in. When did the no-fly?
It was 1991, where the uprising when happened. Saddam Hussein were expelled from Kuwait, his military regime, by the international community. And at the same time, there was an uprising in Kurdistan region and in South by Shia. It's called Sha'ban Intifada, and the uprising in Kurdistan region. So Saddam managed to gather the remaining of his military and send it to Kurdistan region against the Kurdish people. So if we recall that in 1991, due to the attack or assault by the Iraqi military, more than 2 million people in Kurdistan region were fled Kurdistan towards Iran and Turkey. And then the no-fly zone by international community were created, Britain, United States and France.
So that happened
so that
in
saved
91
us.
also?
That was 1991. So it was a few months after the uprising,
right,
when Saddam Hussein's military came back and then bombarded with helicopters and killed thousands of people in the cities, did not distinguish between the civilians and the Peshmerga. So the people had no choice, and then they fled to the border of Iran and Turkey. So the international community at the time, because Saddam came after the invasion of Kuwait and then made that atrocity towards its own people, so they decided to have the no-fly zone for the sake of returning these Kurdish people to their home, because it was a winter time when they were at the mountain, and some of the people were dead because of the cold weather. So no-fly zone were at the time saved us, and the population of Kurdistan region came back, and Saddam Hussein's military and administration were withdrawn from Kurdistan region. So that was a turning point of Kurdistan region to start in establishing its democratic institution, and the first election were
which was what year?
In 1992, the first democratic election in Kurdistan. So the democratic institution started. Since then, we managed to have our own parliament, and then the government, and
so it's a real success story, in fact. I mean, because Kurdistan, well, Iraq is a kind of what Kurdistan would like it to be, I suppose, a confederation now, because the Kurdish region is self-governing. It is effectively autonomous, and all because of that struggle at that time. Although there were a number of issues that remained from those days, I mean, the so-called disputed territories and the issue of Kirkuk, I mean, for example, because there are whole areas of Nineveh province that are claimed by Kurdistan that is also claimed by the central government, and Kirkuk was the classic issue, isn't it? It is.
Well, after the election of Kurdistan region and the withdrawal of Saddam Hussein's military and its administration from Kurdistan region, the United Nations has demarked the line between Kurdistan region and Iraq. So that line, it's a line that included some of the Kurdistani area outside the Kurdistan region of Iraq, for example, for instance, Kirkuk, Mahmur, and some area in close by Khanaqin, and then to the north, Shingal and Badra. That's all included outside the Kurdistani areas.
So these are effectively what people sometimes call the disputed territories.
And ever since it's called the disputed territory, but we have actually changed the name of disputed territory, because we don't consider it as a disputed territory. It's a Kurdistani area, but outside the Kurdistan region. And I think it's worth to mention that in 2003, when the international community liberated Iraq, that was another point that Kurdistan region have voluntarily decided to go to Baghdad and help our colleagues that we fought Saddam Hussein together to rebuild Iraq. And we said, this is a new chapter for Iraq. Let's all work together and build a new Iraq to be democratic, federal, and pluralistic. That's why, excuse me, all the political leaders went to Baghdad, put all their strength politically, to contribute politically in rebuilding Iraq. And of course, economically, we have contributed to overall revenue of Iraq.
Well, thus far it's a real success story, but then we get to the present situation. Let's move on to the situation now, which is if anything slightly disturbing, because goodness knows, bless you, the poor Kurdish region has to cope with ISIS. The northern Iraqi offensive conducted by Islamic State or ISIS or Daesh weakened Iraqi state power, giving the Kurds the chance to increase their independence and possibly move towards fulfilling their ambition to declare an independent Kurdish state. However, the war with Islamic State also resulted in well over 1 million Iraqi and Syrian refugees in the immediate region of Iraqi Kurdistan, an oil and gas price drop. This has left some of the Kurds and others in Iraq living at or below the poverty line, despite being one of the richest countries in the world in terms of oil export per capita. There have been protests in the northern parts of the country against these poor standards of living and against corruption, tribalism, nepotism, clannishness, and the lack of political and economic transparency. Impressively, the current president of Iraqi Kurdistan, Masoud Barzani, leader of the KDP, the Kurdish Democratic Party, and the Kurdistan regional government, has managed to keep the situation in Erbil and Sulaymaniyah under control. So the situation today, we have ISIS, we have Daesh, and this terrible pressure, and no weapons to fight them, or at least not the weapons you really need. This is the fault of the international community?
Well, as you rightly mentioned, that we are really in a tough and difficult situation in Kurdistan region. In one hand, we have economic crisis. On the other hand, we have a fight with terrorist group Daesh, and which has resulted in 1.8 million IDPs and refugees to Kurdistan region, and these IDPs need to be taken care of. So, and again, the Kurdish Peshmerga force and the Peshmerga issue, because it was one of the issue with Baghdad since the formation of the new government, because the Peshmerga force, as part of the Iraqi defense system, they should have get proper training, proper equipment, weapons, and all these artillery. But this never happened. When we faced the first attack by Daesh, we were in a very difficult situation in the first few weeks, and thanks to international community that in August 2014 decided to conduct airstrike and supporting the Kurdistan region and Iraq in this fight. So since then, thanks to the international community, they are providing some weapons to Kurdistan region Peshmerga force, but not a heavy weapon. They providing ammunition to Kurdistan region, but not a proper ammunition to sustain this war, because this war is prolonged. It wasn't a month or two, it's been over a year and a half now. So the Peshmerga force need to be in order to eradicate Daesh for good, we need a proper heavy weapon to confront this brutal organization that captured the more advanced weapon from the Iraqi military at the beginning of June 2014, when they took control of the second largest city of Iraq, the Mosul.
Because it is a terrible war, and it's reached a kind of a stalemate. I know there have been some successes in Anbar province. There's been some successes some very substantial successes in terms of taking back Sinjar in the north from Daesh. And that was done by the Peshmerga forces, and substantial successes around Kirkuk. But nonetheless, that's about as far as you got. I mean, to retake Mosul is a dream unless we get proper weapons for the Kurdish region. I mean, this is a fact, isn't it? I mean,
well, I don't call it a dream, because we have to get rid of this cancer, this terrorist group out of Iraq, and of course out of Syria as well, because they have to be treated at once in Iraq and Syria. There is no border left between Syria and Iraq, and the foreign fighters and the ISIS comes and go freely in this across this border. So we have to treat them in both Iraq and Syria at one theater. So liberating Mosul is not a dream. Yes, we have to liberate Mosul, and Mosul for Daesh is very important. But we need more cooperation between the Peshmerga force and the Iraqi defense ministry. We need a proper weapon for Peshmerga to handle this attack or this advance whenever the plan of liberating Mosul is conducted. However, so far we haven't seen any progress in providing more weapons or heavy weapons to Peshmerga force. The heaviest weapon that we have now is a Milan, I think it's called Milan missile, which has been provided by German, which is very effective. It's proven that it saved life of Peshmerga, and some heavy machinery by Britain were provided to Peshmerga force, but unfortunately for the last 6 months the ammunition or the round of this heavy weapon were run out, and we've been asking both Iraqi Ministry of Defense and the coalition force and the British government for this round or the ammunition to be provided to the Peshmerga, but we haven't seen any yet. So in order to eradicate Daesh, yes, Peshmerga needs a proper weapon and proper equipment, and even non-lethal military equipment. For example, night vision, Google night vision, and basically those equipment to protect the Peshmerga. So even we have a lack of these non-lethal equipment as well.
Because it is a terrible thing. If the international community is not going to arm the Kurds properly, then they have to depend on bombing to liberate these areas. And I mean, we saw the liberation of Kobani in Syria, where they had ended up destroying 70% of the town in order to liberate. So we really do need ground forces, and the only ground forces effectively for these areas are the Kurdish Peshmerga, or else we're going to see another humanitarian disaster with even more waves of refugees from Mosul.
Yes.
In the it's vital.
That's
really.
why we have to be prepared for it. If the Mosul liberation starts, as you said, there will be more wave of refugees, and we have to be prepared for these refugees, and we have to have a proper camps to be built for these refugees. All in all, it's very complex, the situation in the area, and sometimes the interest of the big power in the region and the regional power, there's a colliding of interest. There's a different agenda of the international community's player in the region. We always say we have a common threat, which is Daesh, and we all have to work together, and we all have to a collective effort and one agenda in treating Daesh and eradicating Daesh. We cannot find any reason why the Peshmerga is not properly armed or not being given the proper heavy weapon. It's a notion of some mindset of Iraq when they always think about if Kurds get one step advanced, that's one step closer towards independence.
Yes, well, that may be true, but it's got to be. I mean, you've got to have a proper fight against Daesh. The situation now, I mean, is that this is also added to by the economic problems of Kurdistan, or the Kurdish region, that is, because the oil prices dropped by half. You have agreements with the oil companies for some separate development of oil wells, but they're predicated on you paying for infrastructure work that's been done. I mean, you simply don't have the income. The oil income is not there to well, as I understand it, you served in the Ministry of National Resources, but my understanding is that the Kurdish region is under huge economic pressures because of the costs of the war and so on.
Absolutely. It's a tough situation for all of us, for Kurdistan region, the government, the people, our fight against Daesh, and for the international IOCs, international oil companies in Kurdistan region. Well, the first shock to Kurdistan region was the cut-off budget in 2014 by former Iraqi Prime Minister Mr. Maliki, when unilaterally cut the budget of Kurdistan region. That was the first shock when we faced some difficulties at the time, and then the fight with ISIS, and obviously at the end of 2014 we had a oil for budget deal with Baghdad, and unfortunately this oil did not work properly. Each party accusing the other not implementing the deal properly. However, the Kurdistan region decided to sell its own oil independently in July 2015. But the price of oil declined when we started to do that. And it was unfortunate that we cannot manage to pay the salaries of our civil servant and our Peshmerga. And believe it or not, today our Peshmerga force and our civil servants are not paid for the last 4 months. We are 4 months in arrears paying our Peshmerga and our civil servant.
And that's a tremendous burden on a man at the front line, that he has to worry about his family's income, because he's sacrificing his life, and yet he can't be sure that his loved ones are getting...
Absolutely. So the decline of oil price not only affected the Kurdistan region or Iraq, in fact affected all the producing country. I was in the conference last week in Chatham House, and some of the producing country like Saudi Arabia and other countries, they their national budget were affected by 40 to 43%. So our budget has been affected by more than 50%, and basically we're suffering to cover all these expenses in Kurdistan, the salaries of civil servants, and sustaining this war, because to sustain the war with terrorists, it needs a cost.
And meanwhile, if that weren't enough, you not only have a war to fight and budget problems, but there are also political tensions within Kurdistan. I mean, about President Barzani being given another term of office, the issues, tensions between the PUK and the KDP. Of course, you're not a party politician now because you represent Kurdistan as a whole, but and tensions with Goran. I mean, you have, I don't know, God willing, because this is a recorded broadcast, by the time this broadcast goes out, God willing, things will be okay. But at this present time, at this moment, as we speak, right now, things are far from okay. The Kurdish parliament is effectively not functioning. It's right, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's regrettable that we ended up in this situation. The political scene in Kurdistan region are in this situation. However, each political party, they have their own explanation of the situation. We hope that and our close friend in Britain and international community, they hope that all the political parties, they come up with a mutual understanding of solving this political deadlock between all these political parties, which I think there is some progress, and hopefully by the time that this program will be broadcasted, will be there.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. My goodness, it has been going on, and it can't serve. Well, it doesn't serve. Doesn't serve the nation well, and of course, and there are issues. I mean, there are many issues. I mean, there are issues raised by poor President Talabani and his situation, and I mean, it's not.
Well, his absence, President Talabani's absence in the Iraqi political scene and the Kurdistan region's political scene affected. I mean, we can feel it, and Iraq can feel it, Kurdistan region can feel it, because he was a man of gathering all the differences on the same table and try to solve the issues in dialogue.
Yes, if he were on the scene,
But,
then things might be quite different at the moment.
God bless him. We wish him a good and speedy recovery.
I hope. It seems, but he has suffered severe health problems. I do hope and pray that he can come back to his post, but it is essentially at the moment that's not a short-term possibility. So we have a situation where, I mean, the Kurdish region is flailing about with these internal pressures, plus the economic pressure, plus the war. It's terrible.
One good thing in this internal political disputes that did not affect our fight with Daesh, which is a good thing, but that doesn't mean we have to slow down the process of finding the solution for this crisis. However, sometimes we say that Kurdistan region are under the great threat of terrorists, and we have all these matters mounted up, so we have to deal with this effectively, and then solve our differences afterward.
But it is, in fact, you say it doesn't affect, but it does affect indirectly, because you have a situation where the armed forces fighting ISIS or Daesh or Islamic State, whatever you like to call this group, the armed forces fighting them are in effect different militia. One because there's the armed forces representing Peshmerga representing the PUK, Peshmerga representing the KDP, and within the KDP there may be for different groups loyal to different groups. The problem with this is when you have tensions within these groups, then you don't have the Ministry of Peshmerga is not in overall command. You don't have one. You don't have. You're not acting as one, and it's.
Well, you're right. Excuse me. Still, we have some forces under the name of Force 70. It's called 70, which is still belong to PUK, and 80 belong to KDP. Both political party has decided to form the one united government. In fact, that happened, and the most difficult ministry to unite in the short period of time was Ministry of Peshmerga and Ministry of Finance.
Yes.
However, they started from 5th cabinet, and then the 6th cabinet. They progressed dramatically in unifying these two forces. Because, it's difficult to have two forces when they fought each other for a few years and then put them suddenly under one command. So it's not easy. It takes some time. So 8 brigade, they have managed to unite 8 brigades from both the KDP and PUK, and they are under one command. Unfortunately, the war of Daesh have stopped to unite the other 8 brigades under one, to unite them under one command. That's why we still have a 70 force and 80 force, which 70s belong to PUK and 80 belong to KDP. But they don't take the command and decision from the political parties. They are still under the command of Ministry of Peshmerga. So now when we have a line, we hold a line of 650 mile front to Daesh. All the Peshmerga are under the command of Peshmerga, and they have a chain of command from the Ministry of Peshmerga, and they take the decision from the Ministry of Peshmerga, not the political parties.
Wonderful. So it is an improvement. It's not perfect, but it's an improvement.
It is improvement, but still our desire to see the Ministry of Peshmerga are totally united. All the Peshmerga are totally united and well trained, well organized, and basically the Britain government have decided to help the Kurdistan region in terms of restructuring the Ministry of Peshmerga and helping us to modernize our Ministry of Peshmerga and our forces. And hopefully after this fight, or even within this period of time, the delegation from the Britain Ministry of Defense will go to Kurdistan region to analyze the situation within the Ministry of Peshmerga and try to restructure the ministry.
And the Peshmerga themselves, I mean, people often say, or at least, no, often, but I hear people say that there are problems with the Peshmerga, not with the men, although the more training is always useful, but more with the officers who often get promoted on the basis of family and so on rather than ability. But this war is now hardening up the command chain in the Peshmerga. You would say it's effective?
Some of that happened, you're right, but as I said, the economic crisis that we face was a turning point to the government of Kurdistan region to rethink of the structure of all the ministries and try and start the reform in our economic system and the structure of all the ministries. So yes, we have done some mistakes previously, but now there is much progress in that.
I hope and pray that we will see a a new push and a victory against Daesh. In which context? I mean, perhaps we should move on to the future, because this is a key issue now, the future of Kurdistan, because it's all very well saying we deal with the present situation, but without addressing the future and about addressing the way things will go, it's impossible to do so, I guess. Let's talk about the future. What is the future for the Kurds in the Middle East region? Is it true that government and indeed the internal policy of the Kurdistan region has to be reformed? Is the political system of this nascent country in need of modernization? The Kurdish Democratic Party, KDP, has appealed to the other parties to continue to set aside their differences and support President Masoud Barzani's leadership, at least until the war with ISIS ends. This, they argue, is because it can be unwise to change leaders during wartime. But when will the war end? And will the Kurds finally achieve the nationhood they wish for? And what are the consequences for the Middle East region should the Kurds achieve their ultimate goal and get self-determination and true independence? So, Karwan, the future. I mean, what about the future? Let's assume, I know that there is a referendum, at least there is talk of a referendum ongoing or about to take place, on whether Kurdistan becomes an independent nation. At least that has been in some of the speeches of President Barzani, and that may be moving in that way. It's clear that his dream, the president's dream, president of Kurdish Regional, and no doubt shared by President Talabani of Iraq, I mean, is that we see an independent Kurdistan. That's your aspiration as well, or is that too strong a way of putting it?
No, it's an aspiration of all Kurdish people in Kurdistan region. However, the referendum doesn't mean a declaration of independence. We have to ask the nation what they want, how they have to have a say in the future of Kurdistan region.
But we know they're going to vote for independence, because the Kurds are Kurds, and that's what they will desire, isn't it?
Absolutely. As I said before the beginning of your program, that the history did not treat Kurdistan well, and it was very cruel to Kurdistan region. Otherwise, we could have a state century ago.
Absolutely.
We've been suppressed throughout the consecutive government in Iraq. None of the government were dealt with the Kurdish situation properly. None of them managed to weld all this component in Iraq properly.
Yes.
The broken policy of the consecutive government in Iraq, and even after 2003, made life difficult for Kurdish people. We in Kurdistan region, we have done our best, and we're still doing our best to be within Iraq. But which kind of Iraq we're talking about?
Well,
we're talking about the Iraq to be a democratic, federal, and pluralistic, and we need a fair share of authority in Iraq, and we want to be a real partner in Iraq in all issues in Iraq. Not like now, even when we're facing a common threat, still we don't have a proper coordination together. I always say that if our colleagues in Baghdad, they need the unity of Iraq, so this is a time for our colleagues to unite Iraq properly, because we have a common threat and we have to confront it together. But now we're not getting much from, unfortunately, from Baghdad to confront this threat in Kurdistan region. Yes, the independent Kurdistan is aspiration for everyone. But even in preamble of the Constitution of Iraq saying that the only safeguard for the unity of Iraq is democratic, pluralistic, and federal. And there's otherwise. So if that's not implemented, there's otherwise, which is the people of Kurdistan have to have a say. And again, we're not doing this in violence. We talk with our partner in Baghdad, and we have to find a mutual understanding if the Kurdistan region, the people of Kurdistan region, decided to have independent state. We want our voice to be heard by authority or by the leaders in Iraq, like Scotland and Britain.
Sure. But in the Kurdish case, it's difficult to conduct a referendum because you have key areas like Kirkuk, which don't come under the Kurdish regional government, even though they're administered by the Kurd. I mean,
if that's happened, the referendum, we're not doing the referendum without the involvement of international community and the United Nations. These two entities, they have to take part in observation in the referendum in Kurdistan region, because that gives the legitimacy to the process. And basically, we are in a difficult situation in those areas. And now the Peshmerga force taking control and protecting all these people, Kurd and the other minorities in those areas, the religious minorities and the ethnic minorities. So we need those two entities to be part of the referendum, if the referendum takes place within this year, to make sure that the smooth process will take place and everyone freely say about the future of Kurdistan.
Wonderful. But then, so God grant the referendum takes place, but if you're talking about a confederal Iraq or a federal Iraq or whatever, it's one thing to say that the Kurds should have their separate identity. But in that context, then the Sunni Iraqis, at least the people of Anbar, the people of Nineveh province, or at least those parts of Nineveh province that are Sunni and so on, they should have their own self-government too, shouldn't they?
Well, just would like to remind you of what Mr. Hague, William Hague, said a few weeks ago, I think. And I'm not quoting him because I can't remember exact word, but he said the international community or the Sykes-Picot failed to make these component people live together in peace by force, because the Sykes-Picot was forcing the people to live together in peace.
Yes.
Now it's a time for international community to help these people to live in peace separately. So Iraq, unfortunately, after the invasion of Daesh, has been partitioned, practically.
But would you see an autonomous Sunni region? If you're going to have a truly autonomous Kurdish region, would you see, I mean, can we go forward without giving some sort of similar privileges to the Sunnis of northern Iraq or northwestern Iraq?
Well, constitutionally, they have a right to have a region of their own. The Sunni, they can create a region like some region, because in constitution it's stipulated that
they have a right to do it. At the moment, de facto, they are a region because, of course, they have effectively split away. I mean, there's they're under the Daesh control.
Yeah, exactly. But there should be, in one way or another, the involvement of Sunni in the political scene in Iraq, and their right have to be,
Of course they do.
have to be recognized. But the priority is getting rid of Daesh, because these terrorist organizations are most dangerous, and we have to get rid of them. We have tried all the way of coexistence in Iraq, you know, since decades ago. And none of it is working properly. Therefore, it's a time to find another way of coexisting and living together. Any other formula, call it confederation, separation. So there should be another form of coexistence and living together in Iraq, because we both want to progress. We both want to serve our people in Iraq and Kurdistan region. The people of Kurdistan, the people of Iraq, because they have suffered a lot as well.
Yes,
we're not
yes,
denying their suffering under the Saddam Hussein, and even prior to that regime. So the Iraqi population, Iraqi people, they deserve better treatment and better services and livelihood in Iraq.
But if the Kurdish people get their ultimate aspiration, one of independence, it is a threat to the nations that surround them, Syria and Turkey and Iran, because there are massive Kurdish regions in Syria, in Iran, and on a colossal scale in Turkey. And we see this tension already between the Turks and the what I call the PYD, the Syrian political party, whereby, I mean, the Turks are bombing, have been in recent times, bombing them. I mean, are these neighbors going to even dream of giving you the freedom to pursue the aspiration of Kurdistan for statehood? I mean, wouldn't they invade rather than see a Kurdish state?
We always emphasize on each one focus on their own affair within their territory, and I mean, each part they have to find the way that they want to live in that country. So, as far as I'm concerned, we are only focusing on the Kurdistan region and the way we would like to pursue living within Iraq or without Iraq, or any other form of coexistence. And we certainly try to explain to everyone that even if independence happened in Kurdistan, that's not going to be a threat to our neighboring country.
But you would think that for example, taking a case in point, the Kurds of Syria deserve autonomy, because if the Kurds of Iraq deserves autonomy, it's a given that so do they. I mean, whether you want to unite the two.
Absolutely. I mean, the Kurds in Syria and in Turkey and in Iran, they all have a right within their own country. The Kurds in Syria, they've been prohibited from even a single right, which is identity.
Yeah.
Now we pretty much encourage the Kurdish people in Syria, within Syria, any change in Syria happens, so they are right to be reserved in Syria.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I hope so, and I hope for a better future. What about the? It's boring, I know, but it's critically important. What about the oil issue? I mean, Kurdistan's development can't come on track unless the oil revenues pick up and so on. It is a major problem for the Kurdish region, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we recognize that we should have used the oil revenue to diversify our economy.
Yeah.
And as I said before, this crisis happened in Kurdistan. It's a turning point for the government. It's a shake of the government and trying to change every single crisis into opportunities. So in terms of oil revenue and the decline of the price in the recent month, the government have took some initiative and took some austerity measures in cutting down the expenses of the government by 70 to 75%,
Yes.
Which the government still is running. That's mean when previously we probably in the boom year we've been splashing the money. Now we have to deal with it properly, and we have to diversify the economy, and we prioritize the sector of agriculture, industry, and through our representations around the world, we have 14 representations. We are working hard and trying to bring investors to Kurdistan region to invest in this sector and generate revenues for Kurdistan region.
Wonderful. Well, this is pretty phenomenal, and I do hope you can achieve it. It's your work here, of course, your mission, or one of your key jobs here is to do precisely that, to promote investment in the Kurdish
Absolutely.
region.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Karwan, I do wish you well in this endeavor, and thank you so much for being our guest on ANN satellite television. I hesitate to say it, but I hope that, I hope that not only does the referendum go well, but that we do see a confederal Iraq, at least in the short term, that the Kurdish nation has its own, true autonomy. Because it's the only way forward, I think. But thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It was really interesting, and I'm honored.
Oh, bless your heart. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Well, what did you think? Well, we have on the bottom of the screen as we speak, our email address is there. Do contact us and do let us know what you think. We'd be grateful for your opinions, because there are key issues here. Where does the Kurdish region of Iraq go? Do you believe that the Kurdistan region of Iraq should have independence? It's a huge issue. It affects the entire Middle East, and yet that is their aspiration. And what about this terrible war? What about this terrible war with Daesh, with ISIS? Are the Peshmerga forces together, united enough to retake Mosul? Are we going to see the defeat of Daesh? And do they have the weapons to do it? We cannot see Mosul retaken by bombing alone, because we've seen the consequences, we've seen the destruction of the cities, and we really do need ground forces involved in this action. What do you think? What's your opinion? What is the way forward for the Kurdish region of Iraq? Please let us know what you think. We'd be grateful to hear from you, and thank you for being our guests today on ANN Satellite Television.